Welcome to Storytelling with Lindsay Bednar. Hi, Michelle.
Hi there, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Very good, thanks for asking.
Thanks for coming on today. I have such a little understanding about this whole realm of family law, and I have, some friends who've experienced it. But the things they went through were pretty amicable and easy. And so the basis of my knowledge is from like TV and movies. Like I think of the movie Liar,
Uh-oh, uh-oh, I feel like I'm gonna have a conversation with you like I tell a lot of my clients.
which is great because, yes, it's such a limited view
hmm
into what you actually view. And
Yeah,
of course, media shows it how they want to show it. So I want a more realistic insight into this whole world because the reality is I don't know what the divorce rate is now, but I know
hmm
years ago it was around 50%. So family law is something I anticipate a lot of people deal with at some point in their life. Is that accurate?
absolutely. I mean, absolutely. If you don't go through it yourself, you know somebody who has gone through a divorce, and if it's not a divorce, they've had, maybe a custody or parenting time issue. So I would be very, very, very surprised if people didn't know at least five people who have gone through and either gone through the family court system or retained an attorney to a deal with a family law
For
matter.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. And as a teacher, when I was in education, that was something I saw, a lot. And when you have classes full of students, you have a lot of people going through divorces and family court things. So
absolutely.
um, I have seen that side of it. But I was thinking about how people start. One of my favorite things when I connect with people is how people start in their career paths that get you to where you are now. And when I think of family law, like uh, maybe unjustly so, but one of the words that comes to mind is turmoil because I think of divorce or custody battles, and so I imagine it comes with a lot of weighted things. And so, was your career path, and what ultimately led you to want to delve into family law?
That's a I will try and keep this brief because it's kind of a long-winded question, or a long-winded answer rather. Um, so when I got out of high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Went to a community college.
Most of us.
Yeah, I know. Went to a community college, and I really, I didn't know really where I wanted to go, what my interests were. Um, but I really loved my aunt. This is a little shout out to my aunt Kim. She was a legal secretary, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll give that a shot. So I went to the Minnesota School of Business, was trained as a legal secretary, and it's kind of funny because back when I did it, you were literally learning on a old standard typewriter. That we had
Mm.
typing classes. I actually had to take a shorthand class, if you can believe it. So to learn how to write down things very quickly. And I'm not really all that old either. you know, you
No.
can see me, maybe not everybody can see me, but I don't feel like I'm that old. But yeah, I had to learn shorthand. So I got my legal secretary certification, got a job right away. Quickly found out that I did not enjoy that. There were a lot of things about a legal secretary that I didn't like, but I worked for a family law firm. And that family law firm also had some business side to it. So I went to paralegal school, and I did that, worked as a paralegal for about 5 years, and then landed a job at more of a premier law firm that specialized in complex dissolution proceedings and high conflict cases. And I was working at that firm for quite a long time as a paralegal, and I just got to the point where I was at the cap of what I could do as a paralegal, because paralegals can't give legal advice. There's certain things that we just can't do. So I was walking right up to the line, but not being able to do everything that an attorney could do. And I was pretty young at that time. And so I thought, well, I've got two choices. I can either go to law school or I can change career paths completely. And I made a decision at that time to get back to school and go to law school. But that was a challenge itself because I didn't have a 4 year degree. So I was of a certain age taking gym classes and arts and music because I had to get what I needed to do to get into law school.
Sure.
And when
And
I was
you're
in, yeah, when I was in law school, I thought, I thought to myself, don't limit yourself. I mean, I had worked for a family law firm for many, many years, and I enjoyed it. But I also didn't want, to think that maybe there was another area of law that might interest me more than family law. And it turns out that there really wasn't. I kind of liked maybe elder law a little bit, but I really just gravitated toward family law.
and when you were working, was that a different path than most of the people that you were working with? Had most of them gone to school first before they were in the industry?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, most people will. I mean, if you're they'll go to law school and I'm not really sure how people end up landing in a certain area of law necessarily. It's whether or not it's the first job that you get. I mean, I have said to attorneys in the past that are younger attorneys, if you don't love family law, don't stay in it, because you're going to get pigeonholed, and it's a hard profession. I mean, it's very taxing. I mean, you see people at one of the worst periods of time in their life, and a lot of them are in crisis.
Mm,
Sometimes I equate it to being like an emergency room physician at times. You get these people just panicking, not knowing what to do, not knowing who to go to, especially when their kids are involved. So
sure.
yeah, it's very high stress. It can be very intensive. So if people don't love it when they're in it when they're younger, I don't know why you'd stay in it. That's just a long
Right.
term. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and it's something you probably didn't know earlier on, but now that you've been in it for a while, and just as we get older, we're more self-aware as to our inherent characteristics that
Hmm.
aid us in the career that we're doing. So, what do you feel like is part of your makeup, your own personality, that makes for you to be able to do a job where you are seeing
Hmm.
people at their lowest of the low a lot of times?
You know, I think that I'm pretty. I tend to be pretty empathetic. Um, I will caution my clients that listen, I can listen to you, but I'm not. I'm more expensive than a therapist. So if you've got real issues, you should probably we should talk about getting a therapist for you and not me. But I really do try and listen to people and listen to their concerns. Um, so you've got the emotional side of that, but at this, on the flip side, as an advocate and as an attorney, I feel that, I'm pretty good at, digging into things. A lot of times, what I find in my job is people think, oh, they're hiding money, they're hiding this, there's a girlfriend, there's, all of these things, that these characteristics that people are doing, and clients want to find out. And that's something that I'm willing to do, is to really look into it, and I actually kind of enjoy that. Um,
Yeah, I want to talk
it
more
is.
about
Oh,
that.
that's fun. I mean, that can be fun. And nothing. And I don't want you to think like, oh, I really think divorce is fun. But when you get into types of things where people are hiding in money and finding those accounts that they think are hidden, that's pretty fun. Yeah.
How often does that happen? Because I had so many questions about all of this, but
Yeah.
one of the things I wanted to know is what kinds of things do you see that hurt a divorce or custody battle? Um, and I assume obviously hiding financials is one of
Hmm.
them. So
Hmm.
what's kind of under that umbrella of things that, like, oh, we found this and that's gonna sting?
Yeah. I mean, hiding things is the number one. I think the number one no no. I can't tell. There's been several times where I found out from the other side that my client has behaved poorly, and that is
Mm,
never a good look, right? I mean, because I'm
mm,
an advocate and I want to hear it from my client. I want to hear it from them versus hearing it, while I'm sitting in the courtroom or sitting in mediation, and I hear from the mediator that my client has acted poorly. And I would rather know it and deal with it. But hiding assets, substance abuse can be a pretty big one, and that's always a touchy subject because for a lot of people that's hard. It's hard to talk about that, and it's hard to
yeah,
admit that they may have a problem. Um,
yeah.
and but finding that out, I mean, I just had that happen to me yesterday. Actually, I have a newer client, and I didn't know that there were potential substance abuse issues. And the other side, I was talking with the other attorney, and she alerted me to it, and so I had to confront my client, and that's a hard conversation to have.
Right.
So, substance abuse issues, can be a big deal. Um, Alienating, when parents try and alienate, the other parent for parenting time, and it turns out there's no good reason to do any of the alienation. That's just not a good look for the courts. So, I
Hmm.
mean, it's lots and lots of things that people can get tripped up on.
So with substance abuse, how is that? I feel like that's so common. And
Hmm.
how do you go about proving it if it's somebody's word against the other? And or do people, if it's say your client, or do they
Hmm.
own up to it, or how does that come to fruition? Where I would think there has to be some sort of proof.
Yeah, a lot of times people will own up to it, but if they don't own up to it, the conversation that I will have with my client is, listen, if the other side is saying that you have, substance abuse issues, there are certain measures that can be put into place. Testing requirements, for instance, there's a lot of different agencies that will provide, testing. And, if people don't have a problem, then they should be completely fine with doing the testing. Right. So
Right.
if you do have, and usually it's for a limited period of time. I don't suggest to my clients that if there's an allegation of substance abuse that you do it for 6 months or a year. But if you do it for a little while and you come clean, then hopefully that you've satisfied the other side that maybe you don't have that problem. But there's chemical dependency evaluations that you can ask people to submit to, using, making sure that both parties are collateral witnesses, so that if, my client thinks that, my client thinks maybe her husband has a drinking problem, that my client is able to talk to the evaluator to make sure that all the information is received in the evaluation.
And what happens if they deny the request? Can they do that?
They can, and then you bring a motion. So you ask the judge, you bring a motion, schedule a motion, and you have to have some, you have to have some proof. You just can't say, so proof would be, past DWIs, maybe third party affidavits, talking about, um, you know, all of this, all of the time that maybe some friends or family have witnessed the other individual intoxicated. You have bank records and credit card records, showing the
Mm.
amount of, maybe liquor stores that the person is going to. I mean, I've had people make up some wild and crazy stories about why they have a lot of liquor charges on
Yeah.
their, on their Visa
I
credit
can
card.
imagine
Yeah, Visa
what
credit
those
card.
stories.
Oh yeah, no, people can be pretty creative.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Uh, yeah, I mean, it leads into another thing I was curious about is how often do people trump up stories? Because I've known of some relationships where there have been some accusations, and I'm like, I just that doesn't sit right. And I know the characters of each
Mm-hmm.
party, and um, I'm not buying it. And so, is that a common theme that you see? And if so, which
Yeah,
gender?
yeah. I mean, I think most people, I shouldn't say most people. I think that, when you're in a situation like this and you're, you know, trying to get a certain parenting time arrangement, or there's financial issues that are an issue, I think that it's kind of common for people to stretch the truth. And some people stretch the truth a little bit further than others will stretch the truth. Um,
Mm,
what people need to understand, though, is they're not as smart as they think they are.
yeah.
I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's you can you can see the same stories, the same things coming out in dissolution cases, and
Mm,
it's not. It might be a different little variation of a story, but it's something that we've seen before. So it yeah, I don't know if that's really answering your question, but it's not uncommon to have people, you know, telling little white lies or big white lies, right? Or just flat out lies, you know.
yeah. And I suppose you get really good at just reading people and
Hmm.
the way that they deliver a story, or what it is that they're saying about,
Yeah.
their ex or spouse. Okay.
And a lot of times there's paper trails. I mean, there can be a lot of paper trails with the financial data. If you have, a good attorney who's willing, and I love, by the way, that you keep using the word curious, because that is something I taught paralegals for a while. I don't know, years and years ago, and that is the word that I would use for them when I was teaching them. Is I would say that the best thing that you can do in family law is to remain curious, because when I'm looking at a bank statement, I might see a bank statement. I mean, every client of mine in a divorce, I have to look at a bank statement. But if I'm not curious about what is being charged or what money is running through that, then I'm doing my client a disservice. So I like that you're using that word.
Yeah. Well, thanks. It's been a buzzword of my friend and I. We just recorded a podcast last week, and we
Hmm.
always joke about being curious because that is like one of the things we want to bring to any kind of situation. I think, especially in 2024 when things are so like divided and heightened, the best thing way we can approach anything is with curiosity.
Yeah,
um, and it, that also just avoids a lot of conflict and intention and disagreements that just are
yeah,
unnecessary.
absolutely,
In addition to you digging and finding things, so it works in a multitude of ways.
absolutely.
So, do you are the cases that you work with, are they more with divorce or custody, or is it kind of split?
I would, okay, so divorce and custody can be the same. You can have a divorce and have a custody case within the divorce. So that's not. I don't think that I can do a percentage of that, because
Sure.
if there's kids involved and going through a divorce and they don't agree, then you've got a custody proceeding within a divorce. Um, Custody itself is going to be when people are not married. That's why you would bring just a regular, a custody case would be if you have two people who have had a relationship. Sometimes they've had a relationship for a really long time and they have a child and then their relationship is ending. And since they're not married, they can't do a divorce. So they bring a custody proceeding. Sometimes you've got the one night stands. Um, so we have those cases too. I don't get as many of those. Most of the time it's a custody case that people retain me for is it's a longer relationship and they're just ending it and there happens to be, one or two kiddos involved.
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to know more about the the marriage laws because I remember, for instance, when I was in college and um, it was my health teacher. She was in a lesbian partnership. This was before uh, gay marriage was passed, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember her sharing the story with our classes about. She had a pretty high profile story. Her wife was involved in a car accident, and because they didn't weren't married and the law wasn't recognized it, she did not have very many rights in that
Mm-hmm.
courtship. And
Mm-hmm.
so I remember when they were going to pass gay marriage, and I was, sharing the importance of it and things. And so I know that there, at least previously, were uh, that people didn't have as many rights outside of being married. So
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
does that look like now? What kinds of rights uh, does a person have in a courtship if they're not married? Um, Maybe if it's under common law, you can talk about common law too. And is it different if they have children together, assets together, that kind of thing?
Well, Minnesota doesn't have common law, so
Oh,
we're
okay.
not a common law state.
So
So
that's
that,
probably why that happened.
huh? What was
That's
that?
probably why. So perhaps that's why that happened, or maybe it was just
With
because,
your health teacher?
yeah, maybe it was because it
You
was a
know,
same-sex partnership.
yeah, I'm wondering if I know which case you're talking about, to be honest with you. It was a big case. Gosh, I want to say, was the name Sharon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about because my former boss, where I started out as a paralegal, she was one of the attorneys in that case.
Oh, wow.
It was before my time, but yeah, I know exactly which case you're talking about. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I mean now if same sex couples, it's the same as if they were, if they're married and they're getting a divorce, it's the same. It's not any different. Um,
Yeah.
so I mean, it's just with the unmarried couples, um, you know, that's where it can be a little bit tricky if it's a heterosexual couple. Nothing's. there's nothing really that is different. And I'm not completely brushed up on the same sex issues. Those are something that when I get a case, I actually do some research a little bit just to brush up on it because I don't get as many of those. So
Okay.
I don't know that I really want to talk about that completely, but there are things that they can do, to make sure that they get custody and parenting time. And if it doesn't fall under, custody and parenting time, then there's a different proceeding that they can do. It's called third party custody. So that gets into a whole other realm of family law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So with two parents who are not married, but
Mhm.
say have that they don't have or they do have children together, you're getting into a custody case. What kinds of uh, legal rights do each have, and are we? I've always heard that we're a state that favors the mom in those kinds of situations. Is that accurate? Is that a misconception?
Well, that's hard actually, because even if so, let's say I'm just going to make Bob and Sue, right? The generic names. Let's say Bob and Sue have a relationship. They have little Jimmy, and 5 years happen, and they're living in the same house, not living in the same whatever. They're co-parenting, and they're doing just fine. If mom decides for whatever reason that she's angry because I don't know, maybe Bob got a new relationship with a new girlfriend, and now the new girlfriend's coming into the picture. I mean, you can imagine all the turmoil that happens with that. Mom can just,
Hmm.
even if there's a recognition of parentage signed by dad at the hospital, mom has sole legal and sole physical custody of the child until the court says otherwise. So that means dad has to rush to the court to start an action so that he can get some custody and parenting time and start making decisions with regard to their child, which I
Wow.
think is a little archaic.
Hmm.
But I get a lot of dads who say they don't understand and it's not fair, and I agree with them. It
Hmm.
really upsets me when moms take that position right away, that all of a sudden, just because they have that, I guess, power, for lack of better words, that they invoke that. Because
Yes.
as long as there's nothing wrong with the parent relationship, do you know who it's damaging? It's not hurting dad, it's hurting the kids. And
Right.
that's the trouble that I have, is like, why are you doing that to your child?
Yeah, it seems like a scorned woman move, if it's coming from the place of, okay, well, they've moved, husband's moved on, he has somebody else, and they're going to
Well, it's not
beat them to
husband in that case. Yeah, it's not husband in that case. If you're
right,
married, yeah,
right.
it's an unmarried couple. So it's more
Yeah.
like boyfriend, girlfriend, or one night stand, or whatever it is. It's an unmarried couple
So
that's
the
parenting.
default, yeah, the default is, yep.
Yep. Default goes to mom when the couple is not married. Yep.
Mm,
Even if everything's been going hunky dory for 5, 10 years.
wow. So what if the mom, and you know, I can think of situations. What if the mom isn't as fit as the father? Does that just come out hopefully in the custody
Yeah.
battle or okay.
Yep, yep. And you could, I mean, if you had a situation where, mom was, using drugs or doing something, unsafe, I mean, you could bring an emergency motion before the court, and ask that something happen. I mean, the problem is that, like what you were saying at the very beginning, is that you're limited to like TV. And, I get that a lot with my clients. They want instant action, instant gratification. They want the court to make a decision, and it doesn't work that fast. I mean, it is very, very slow. And our court system, especially in family law, has gotten even slower after COVID. So
I the
it can
yeah.
take months to just get a hearing date, right? So you get a hearing date, and let's say there's a parenting time issue, and mom is withholding parenting time or not giving as much parenting time to dad as dad thinks he deserves. We can't reach an agreement. We try to go to mediation, maybe see if we can get a deal. If that doesn't work, we have to wait to get a hearing date with the court, and sometimes that can take 6 months to get a hearing date, right? So now we're 6 months out. Well, we have the hearing date. Judges aren't required to issue an order until 90 days after that hearing. So you could be looking at 9 months from when the issue was raised with me until I can get a result for my client through the court system, which can be frustrating, pretty much for almost everybody involved, except for the person that is, maybe withholding the child. Um, so, I mean,
Right.
that's hard. It's hard. It's hard for me to explain that to clients that I don't have any control. I'm going as quickly as I can within the
Mhm.
system, but the system isn't always perfect, and we're a little overtaxed right now.
So if you have a unmarried couple with a child, and something like that happens, mom goes to, they go to court over custody. With all of this tying up, potentially this kid could go without seeing their dad for 9 months
I
if
think
the mom's
that
unwilling.
might be an extreme.
Okay.
If no parenting time at all would be an extreme. I think if that were happening, I would do something different. I would perhaps ask for maybe more of an emergency type hearing to address that. At least
Okay.
get a phone call. That I wouldn't. I don't think that the courts would, unless there's endangerment issues. I think that that's tough. I mean, I'm not going to say that that wouldn't happen in a certain situation in a certain county with. I mean, I can't predict what would happen with different judges in different, counties, but
Sure.
as an attorney, I would definitely try to do something to prevent that from happening.
You spoke to kind of the time of how things move. So what is the average span from when somebody comes to you, says I want to file for
Mhm.
divorce? On average, when does that come to fruition and when is it settled?
That's a good question. So if you file the petition, right away, let's say, you came to me today and we got everything served and filed, next week, and we have a judicial officer assigned. There's no golden rule about how long courts want, how long you can keep your file active, in the court system. But as a general rule, judges like to see cases come in and out within a year. So, and that's a long time.
Hmm.
But that's if you have to go through the whole court system and get to a trial. So, judges are very aware of how long a case has been with them and underneath, what they're responsible for. So we have a lot of setting of status conferences and, just kind of check-ins with the court so that the court can see where we're at and see if there's anything that the court can do to assist everybody moving along. But generally speaking, it's about a year.
Okay. And what happens if, say, you have a stay-at-home mom, the husband is the breadwinner, and they go to file for divorce? Uh, what happens financially in that time before it's settled? Because that would be, a question I would have if, say, hypothetically, and Gary, I'm not going anywhere, neither are you, but and we both work, but I would feel as a woman so vulnerable, as to what's going to happen next. Like my job's been taking care of the kids
Yeah.
in the home, and so what does that process look like?
Well, oftentimes that's very scary. And that's unfortunately, I think a lot of women, are stuck in relationships that are unsafe and not healthy because of that fear. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the only thing that we can do is really try to get the other side to agree to a status quo on a temporary basis. And sometimes, sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. And again, if you can't reach that in agreement on how temporary finances are going to be paid, sometimes, people have to take loans from their family to get them by for a little bit until we can get into the court system and until we can get before the judge and say, hey, judge, this is how we were operating our finances before. He's not paying. But, if we go back to that conversation that we had, earlier about what are some things that look good and look bad, I think this is one of those situations where if I had the money spouse, I would say, listen, you don't want to go in front of this judge and have who might be making the final decision for you on, custody, parenting time, finances, whatever. And I have to look at them and say, yeah, I know there's this mortgage and I know, she needs money for gas and, food for the kids, but my guy just he doesn't want to pay.
Right.
That's not a good look. So, if I have the moneyed spouse, I'm going to try really hard to talk them into paying something, at least do something so that it doesn't get before the court and you have this bad first impression. Sometimes those bad
Right.
first impressions, they stick and it's really hard to get out from underneath them.
Sure. Well, what if, okay, now I'm I'm getting into more hypotheticals.
Sure.
So what if the wife, say she's a stay-at-home mom again, but she has been um, uh, she's had infidelity, which is what drove them to divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so um, is did we? I don't think we talked about this yet. Is this a no-fault state?
Correct. No fault state.
Okay, so will you just briefly explain what that means?
No fault means all that has to be pled in a divorce petition is that there's an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. Don't have to say why, you don't have to say what it is, it's just that there's a breakdown and it can't be fixed. That's all that needs to be pled. But, with infidelity, that is a very common reason, for a divorce. And I have a lot of people say, well, doesn't it mean anything? And I guess the answer to that is it depends. Infidelity can come into play with a custody and parenting time case, for instance, because you've already got a potential third person that's involved. And is this third person going to be meeting the children? Is this third person going
Right.
to be taking, time away from parenting? Is this new relationship more interesting and fun than being a parent? So for
Mhm.
custody and parenting time issues, it's not like you can point the finger and say he or she cheated, therefore I should have more time, but it might come into play and it might be factored in on the custody and parenting time for that reason. On the financial piece, and I'm usually it's the husband. So on the financial piece, it's because the husband is, potentially buying gifts or taking trips or buying jewelry, or sometimes when there's wealth involved, they're paying for a whole nother house for a significant other, and sometimes this money adds up to be a lot of money. And when that happens and we can trace it and we can find it, we add that money back onto the balance sheet, or at least attempt to make the person whole, so that
Mm.
50 grand
Yeah,
50 grand hasn't been spent on girlfriend or boyfriend, and I have to tell my client, too bad, so sad, that sucks for you.
that's gotta be so vindicating when you can find that for your client
Hmm.
who's been wronged. I can imagine, like,
Yeah,
the heel
I've had some
bumps.
pretty big what we call a depletion claim. I've had some pretty big ones, like very large, and then I've had some where I've just had to say, you know what, I know there's a Victoria's Secret charge on the credit card, but it's $100. You got to let it go because that's the only thing we can find. Um,
Mhm.
but it could be very very large or not anything that we want to bring up.
Yeah. So you've seen, more than once where, people are paying for, like, a whole other, basically, lifestyle for, somebody else that they've been hiding?
Yeah, I have.
Oh,
Yeah,
yikes.
yeah, yeah, and it's
And
sad.
is
It's
this
sad. It's sad. It's sad when the other person doesn't know.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, it's
And you
hard.
have to break that to them?
Well, it kind of comes out in conversation, right? I mean, a lot of times that's usually the reason for the divorce is they find out what's been going on and then they come, and talk to an attorney about getting a divorce. I can't say that other than like the Victoria's Secret charges that I've talked about. If it's a big depletion claim, because there's been money that's spent on a significant other, I can't even recall a situation where that's been discovered in the midst of a divorce. My client already knows about it. And we're
Oh,
just
got it.
charged with, okay, go through all the Amex cards and look at all I mean, Amex will show you who the flight is for. if you're purchasing a flight for
Sure.
somebody else, then you just see, oh, that was for Bob and this one's that's for Gina. Yep, no, Gina, here's Gina again. Gina gets to go to Vegas again. So, then you just
Oh,
add up
that
all the charges and then you look at how much time they spent in Vegas and just start creating a
mhm.
spreadsheet and keeping track of it.
Yeah, the bravado of people to think that they can just slide that under the rug and get away with it is fascinating to me.
Well, yes, and then there's personality disorders that come into play, and you know
Mhm.
I can't say that
Yeah,
everybody who obviously wouldn't say that anybody who has a significant other would be has a personality disorder. I would never ever say that, but sometimes that comes into play.
mhm. Yeah, I imagine that you've dealt with some narcissists and
Mhm.
throughout your career and mhm.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, and real ones, and then of course, a lot of people tell me that they think that their soon-to-be ex-spouse is a narcissist, and unless there's a diagnosis, they're not.
Yeah, I mean, I that term narcissist, I see it so often on social media, and I think it's definitely overused. I think there's narcissistic personality disorder, and then there's guys who are just assholes, and it's, they're not the same
Yep,
thing.
yep, and people can have tendencies and traits of being a narcissist or any other type of personality disorder, but that doesn't mean that they're a full-blown narcissist.
Right, right,
Which I'm sure still, well, like you said, if they're being an asshole, it doesn't make it any easier to deal with them.
for sure.
But
So do you have, like, therapists, psychologists that, you'll bring in often for this type of stuff?
absolutely, yep. So if we, if people can't reach an agreement on custody and parenting time, we can have them go through a custody and parenting time evaluation. Um, the evaluators, not all of them are mental health professionals, but some of them are. And with a custody and parenting time evaluation, usually that evaluator has the option to direct the parties to participate in a psychological evaluation if needed, a chemical dependency evaluation if they think it's needed. So if there are allegations, being flung about chemical dependency, an option that the evaluator would have would be to have the parties participate, one or both parties participate in either a psych eval or a chemical dependency evaluation.
Okay,
And then they would take those results and work it into their report for custody and parenting time.
sure. I would imagine you work pretty closely with social workers as well?
Nope, not social workers.
You don't? Okay,
No.
so I was thinking, um, many of my students had social workers over the years, so I didn't know if that was something that you, with custody, if there are, the kind of the welfare checks, or if that goes through the social workers, and they get brought into the mix at all.
If there was a custody and parenting time evaluation, again, if the parents can't agree on that and that evaluation is necessary, then the evaluator would certainly interview those, key people in the child's life. So they might talk to the teacher, they might talk to a social worker. If the children or child is in therapy, the evaluator would talk to the therapist. So I
Okay.
just don't personally have that connection with those individuals.
Okay, got it. You had talked earlier, you had mentioned COVID, and that was something I wanted to talk to you about because there's not a industry that wasn't hit by COVID in some
Hmm.
way. So,
Yeah.
what, how did it affect your industry the most?
I just think we saw a huge, huge rise in people coming to us and asking for a divorce.
Mm,
Um, the reality is that I think people's relationships were tested by
right,
having to be in the same spot and not being able to get out and have that break. So I think I think it was a test for a lot of people's relationship, and perhaps those that were just on the brink of getting a divorce, they were pushed toward that.
for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's what I anticipated. And I haven't looked at any of the statistics, but I wonder what the climb was in like the last several years.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I haven't either. I can tell you that my practice has grown.
Mm,
So I mean, we're busy. We're busy, and
yeah,
asking in the family law community, the family law community in general is busy. The courts are busy. Um, uh, I mean, like I said, it's very difficult, to get into the court system, or it can be. I shouldn't say that all the time it's difficult, but it's, calendars can be challenging to get on the judge's calendar. And I think that's just because of, how many people are in, family law situations right now.
yeah,
And with, and with COVID, I mean, I suppose one thing that we can talk about too is people lost their job, or maybe they had a job that had increases in their income. So then you've got, people who are already divorced or already have a support order and they're looking at a modification. So, somebody's
sure.
income is increased or somebody's income is decreased for whatever reason. And, the support order that's in place is unreasonable, unfair, and under the statute. When that happens and you meet the criteria, you can go in and ask the court for, an increase or decrease to the support order.
Yeah, I suppose for a lot of people, it was that perfect storm with so many
Mm-hmm.
people getting laid off and then being in close corners without really a lot of reprieve.
Yeah,
And so if they were on the brink, that was probably the straw that broke the camel's back.
absolutely. Yep. Yep.
I was very curious to know what age group do you see most common where people are getting divorced? Because I I know growing up, and I think probably into my adulthood, I would see a lot of people choose to get divorced after their kids would leave home.
Yep. And that would
And
be the age that I would tell you.
okay,
Probably, and I don't want to put a certain age on a person anymore, because like nowadays people are having children later. So I think the timing wise, it's when the children are in high school or just getting out of high school. So, and many people probably should have gotten divorced before then, but they have it in
hmm,
their mind that it's better for the kids to stick together until, the kids are older and they think that they can handle it. And maybe that's true for those children. Each child is different as well. But yeah, that's usually the age. It's when the kids are a little bit older.
I'm so glad you said that they probably thought it was better for the kids. And as you said, perhaps in some families that was the
Mm-hmm.
case. But yeah, I have talked to a number of people who said, gosh, my parents get along so much better now
Yep.
that they're apart. And I wish they would have saved me from hearing them arguing as a kid, and they would have made this decision so much sooner.
Yeah. And I maybe looking back, these parents wish they would have done it differently too, right? But
Sure.
for
Yeah,
those parents, I guess their heart was in the right place. They thought they were
for
doing
sure.
something. I mean, you can't really fault them for thinking that they were doing what's best for their kids. Um,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
there's beyond just wanting to keep the family unit together, which I think anybody who has children, that's like your
Hmm.
goal. So I can fully appreciate that. Um, but in addition to that, the logistics of everything, and adding that whole other layer, it's you're taking on a lot of stress. That yeah, I completely get that. It's not an easy decision by any means.
No, no, no. And the fear of the unknown is, that can be challenging for people too. And you know, I, I'm fortunate that I've had former clients who have done this for me. So I have had people where I say, I mean, it's not uncommon for people to be in tears, when they're talking with me, and or just be upset and angry and mad. I mean, all of those emotions, it's normal. I mean, when you're
Mhm.
going through a divorce, you're going through a grieving process. You're grieving the loss of your marriage, and some people handle that better than others, and some people go through the stages quicker or better than others. Uh, you can have a client who's coming in who they've thought about this for 6 months, longer, 9 months, whatever, and they're ready to get a divorce and their spouse has no idea. So they've already gone through some of those emotions and thoughts and kind of wrestled with themselves about what they're going to do. And then they hit the other person with this, no, we're going to get a divorce. Well, now this person's behind, right? So that the other spouse still has to go through that same process. And so sometimes it takes a while to have the other person catch up. Um, but what I will tell people is, listen, this is really hard. This is difficult, but you know what I want you to do? I want you to reach out to me in a year. 1 year from now, when your divorce is done, reach out to me and let me know how things are going, because I am going to bet that you are going to be doing better. You're going to be in a better place. It doesn't seem like it right now, but you're going to
Mhm.
be in a better place. And I really appreciate the clients who do that for me,
Right?
because those are the people that really fill up my bucket, because it's my job is really hard. And um, dealing with these emotions and really keeping people going and on the right path. And when I can hear that people are doing well and that they're happy and that they've made the right decision for themselves and their kids and their family, it's nice to hear. So I don't, and I guess on the flip side, I haven't had anybody call me up and say, "You're such a liar, Michelle. I hate my life." I mean,
Or
I suppose there are people that probably are out there like that are like that too. But yeah, it's
yeah, well, and as you said, it is a grieving process, and
mhm,
I've watched so many people go through it, and it's not just the losing somebody that at one point you very much loved and maybe still do love, and
yeah,
they were your partner and your rock probably. But then it's also grieving the idea of that life with that person, and so it's so layered, and it's
very
yeah, I think
layered. It's very
it comes
layered.
back.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you've got in-laws, you've got mutual friends, you have, if you have kids, you have to show up at their sporting events or their school events and you see the same people. And but it's very multi-layered, very
Mhm.
multi-layered.
You spoke to one of the things that you love hearing in your job, and I wanted to know about more of those happy moments. Like, what are those things uh, that happen that really fill your cup and make you love what you're doing?
Well, gosh, I think the biggest thing is like what I said, when I can hear people, after it's all done, that they're in a good place. But I guess something that I haven't really thought about too much, but I can also sense when people are in a better place. So they come to me in their first couple phone calls, they're panicked and very very upset, and then as they're going further along in the process, I can hear that they're settling down and um, maybe getting to a happier place and are not in that crisis mode. I really like hearing when maybe when children have been struggling at the very beginning, and then oh, they've turned their grades around, or oh, they're doing things, the kids are doing things that are bettering themselves, and they're not in a terrible place anymore. um I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a really difficult job, and I'm not really sure that a lot of people can appreciate that. And you think that, oh, Michelle's an attorney, that it's not necessarily a glorified job. It's hard. It's a
Mhm.
hard position to
Mhm.
be in. And there's a lot of things that I have to say and do that people don't like, and it can be a very difficult to deliver an order where, I'm sorry, but you're not getting the parenting time that you want, or we were asking for this much in financial support and the judge only gave you this. That's hard news to deliver.
Sure. You're walking people through such an intimate and vulnerable time in their life, and it's probably both equally difficult as it is beautiful to help them get through it.
Yeah, and it's also kind of strange too, because I can go back, and I mean, I've been doing this for a really long time, and I can think of so many people that I would have conversations with 2, 3 times a week, right? And then they're divorced and then they're gone. I don't hear from them
Okay.
again. And that's
Yeah.
and that's really strange, right? I mean, it's very strange to develop a relationship with somebody, and they're my client. I mean, I don't. It's not like I'm having like long lasting friendships necessarily, but it's very different, having those conversations and being very involved with somebody's life, and then but at the same time, great. I
Right.
hope I never have to hear from them again at the same time, because that
Right.
that means that everything's going well and they don't need me to figure anything out for them.
Yeah.
So that's also
Yeah.
good.
It's got to be a bit surreal to be really so close. And like you said, I'm sure um, people are really leaning on you for more than just legal advice during this time, as
Well,
much
they
as,
try. Yes. No, they try, and I have a list of therapists
Yeah.
that I will recommend. Um,
Pass that across.
but I
Yeah.
also I also have to caution people, and I can't tell you how many times that a text message will go out or an email will go out, and I just, will shake my head saying, I wish you wouldn't have sent that. I wish that
Mm,
message wouldn't have gone, because once it's out there, you can't take it back. So
yeah.
I do tell clients when they're in that spot, I tell them, just send it to me. If you need to send it to somebody and it makes you feel good to get that out, just write it all
Yeah.
down, get it all out, send it to me, and I'll delete it. It won't go
Yeah.
anywhere. But yeah,
Yeah. That writing is super cathartic. So I can see
it
that.
is.
Just
Yep.
get it off their chest.
Yep.
And maybe just to have somebody else receive it and make them feel seen and heard, even if you're just going to delete it.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. Uh, okay, we talked a bit about the uh, misconceptions. There was just, um, oh, I know. As not to go in a totally new direction, can you talk about the difference between physical versus legal custody and why is that important for people to know as they're entering into a custody agreement?
Yeah, for sure. So legal custody means the parent's ability to make decisions regarding a child's medical care, their religious upbringing, and their education. So those are the three buckets of legal custody. And in Minnesota, there's a presumption that both parents should have legal custody. So joint legal custody, it's a rebuttable presumption. Now that presumption is rebuttable, and I can tell you that there's been a handful of my cases where I have gotten sole legal custody for one parent, and usually there's good reason. So,
Hmm.
you know, more often than not, a parent should be able to make those big life decisions for their child. So that's what legal custody is. Physical custody is more or less what it sounds like, where the child is physically. And it used to be years ago that that label mattered a lot because it was tied to child support. It is no longer
Mm,
tied to child support. So physical custody doesn't mean as much as it used to. So I can have a situation where I have parenting time split that's 60-40. So let's say mom has 60% of the time and dad has 40% of the time. If dad wants to call it joint physical custody, okay. It doesn't really matter.
okay.
It doesn't matter as much. I mean, it can matter, if maybe if mom wants to try and make an argument that, he shouldn't have any more parenting time, maybe the label might help a little bit, but it really doesn't matter as much anymore.
Okay. So, and with child support, what is kind of the default for that that
Well,
can
there's
happen
no
in a
there's no default. So, and one thing that I should say about physical custody too, is that there's also a presumption that a parent should have a minimum of 25% parenting time, which usually equates to be about 4 out of 14 nights. So it's every other weekend and one overnight during midweek. That's a 4 out of 14 night parenting time schedule. So that's the kind of a default for parenting time. We're seeing more and more that it's getting closer to an equal parenting time if that's what's in the kid's best interest. Usually not with younger children, but as children get into school age, that's kind of what people see now.
okay.
But child support, what was your question about that?
Yeah. how is that typically delineated? With obviously it's a reflection of the caregiver's income, but
Yep. Yep. It's both incomes. Yep. Yep. So you have, and child support is, I don't want to take away my job necessarily, but it's kind of easy to figure out. You can play with the numbers. There's a calculator that's online, and there's data points that you enter in. So it's the gross income for both parents. So for mom and dad, you put in the incomes, gross incomes. Um, you will include whether one parent is paying for medical and dental insurance. That number can be plugged in. Then that's the number just for the child or children, not for dad's insurance or mom's insurance. So it's just the cost for the children alone. And you can plug in if daycare is a cost. And then you put in the number of overnights. So if
mm,
it's equal parenting time, you'd put in 182.5. If it's a different type of schedule and maybe mom has 100 and dad has 200, you'd plug in those numbers and then you hit calculate and pops the number.
okay.
So it's not difficult. The difficult piece is maybe figuring out what the income is. If you don't have a W-2 employee, or maybe one parent is underemployed, you've got the instance where you were saying that, maybe wife wasn't working. Well, does wife have the ability to work? What should that income look
Mm,
like? So that's where the arguments will come in, is what's the
got
appropriate number to put in for people's income. But if you have two W-2 employees, it's usually not that hard.
Okay, so somebody who's been, say, a stay-at-home mom for most of their life, and then they get through a divorce, if they're able-bodied, this is when a lot of women find themselves uh, going back to work or maybe working for the first time
Yeah.
because of that.
Yep. Yep. And you have situations where you might say, all right, we'll agree that she can earn. I'm just throwing out a number. Let's say she can earn $35,000 a year because she's hasn't worked in 20 years. She's young enough. Um, this is an entry level position somewhere. Um, if she doesn't want to work, she doesn't have to work, but the court will presume that she has the ability to make that much, so support would be set accordingly, as if she had that income. But it's, you can choose to work or not work. That's going to be up to that individual person, but the court will impute income if you're, young enough and able and you don't have any physical or mental limitations prohibiting you from working.
Okay.
Typically,
Yeah.
I should say not all the time. I mean, there's always the caveats, but generally speaking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know of some situations where uh, female wants to keep they're accustomed to their lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
of being at home,
Yep.
and so is that more of I don't want to say a leniency, but an agreement that they come to with the other party that they're going to continue to do so? Do they have to be kind of excused to not have to work and for the other spouse to
And I
pay? Is
suppose, you could reach an agreement that her income is zero. I guess. I mean, you can reach any agreement you want that's reasonable, and
uh-huh.
if the court looks at it and says it's a reasonable agreement, the court may usually will sign off on it, especially if there's two attorneys involved. But what the point that I was making is if we're sticking with this wife, I don't like to gender do it too much, but we'll just stick with what you were talking about. So let's say wife isn't
Yeah.
working. Let's say they're 50. They're both about 50. She hasn't worked in 20 years or so, maybe 20, 25 years, but she's 50. She still has a good 25, 27 years left to work.
Mm-hmm.
If husband agrees that she doesn't have to go back to work, I guess they can reach that agreement. I would be surprised if that agreement
Right.
was met, unless they have a lot of money and wife gets a pile of money and she's going to earn interest off of the property settlement, and then she won't have to work because she can live off the interest income. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's another, and you know what? Family law and law in general is a lot of it depends. And so,
Sure.
you hear that a lot, but yeah, it's going to depend on the facts of that specific family.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Uh, you talked about some of the best parts. What would you say is the hardest part?
Oh, oh
You
gosh.
had to
Yeah, I mean, if gosh, how much longer do we have? Um,
name
yeah, I think for me, it's the kids.
one.
I'm a mom. I have two boys. They're grown. I still want to, as adults, protect them as much as possible. I think that's just, a natural instinct. So when when I see kids struggling and I see situations where parents just don't get it because sometimes they just don't, that's really hard.
Yeah.
I don't like seeing how kids get impacted. Um,
Mm,
and tough custody cases are really hard. They keep you up at night. I
I'm
mean, they
sure.
really do. They really do. When there's abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, that's just, it's hard to see. It's really
Mhm.
hard to see, hard to manage. So that's difficult. Um, Domestic violence is hard. On either side, I've had male clients who have been abused by their wife. That doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Domestic violence is hard. Sometimes just how long the process can take in general and having people frustrated, that's hard.
sure.
I try and wrap things up as quickly as I can. I mean, some divorces you can get somebody in, you can get a client in, you can go to one mediation session and you write it up and you can be done in 3 to 4 months, right? It's
Yeah.
possible. Um, Others it just really, really drags on and that can be hard. It's hard on the entire family
Mhm.
to have the process take so long.
From my experience when I was teaching, it seemed like it's not it's not easy for a kid to be taken out of the home, and I don't know if that's a Minnesota thing or what, but I knew of a lot of things that kids were enduring. There were social workers involved in things. Uh, it was it was very rare that a kid was in foster care. Most all of my kids were still in homes where that stuff was going on. So, um, is that what you see? And I guess my question is, I'm gonna ask why, even though I think I know, but
Mhm.
what factors into that, and what does it take to get a kid removed from a unsafe environment?
I'll be honest with you, Lindsay, I don't see a lot of that. My in I've had child protection involved in my cases, but it's never been to an extreme where there's been such violence or abuse by one or both parents that I've had that come into play. That
Okay.
and generally speaking, that's not something that my firm deals with. I mean, I'm thinking we have like 8 attorneys here, and I can't think of a case right now or in since I've been here that because we talk, right? I mean, I would know if there was something that extreme that happened in the office. So um, yeah, I don't have a good answer for you on that.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, super sad. Again, it's the kids and it's you know people don't understand that what they do and how they act with children at a young age is going to impact their whole life.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
it's hard.
We uh, my students would go through an ACEs test with
Right. Mm-hmm.
the adverse childhood
Yep.
experience,
Yep.
and um, many of them would score a 10 out of 10,
Jeez.
9 out of 10. That was common. I taught in the alternative high school realm,
Okay.
and so
That
those are
literally
kids who
just
are at
gave me the chills. Like,
yeah,
that's awful.
yeah. So, for those of you listening who aren't aware of the test, it basically asks it's 10 questions.
Hmm.
If there is substance abuse in the home, if there's violence, if there's, and some of the things are, they're not traumatic. It might I
One of
shouldn't say
them's a
traumatic.
divorce. I
Yeah,
mean,
one of
and
them's a
that it's traumatic. That could be traumatic, but not as traumatic
not violent.
as, yeah, as maybe some violence. Yeah, drug use I think is one of them, and yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and and so you see this, and then you realize um, what a hurdle just getting past those things, because even the your health, your chances of heart disease and cancer and all those things go
Yep.
up with these scores. So yeah, for sure the kids part has got to be the most difficult. But what the the fact that you're able to step into that role and to be somebody that people can talk to, because it is such a difficult role. We need more people who are empathetic, who can handle being there through the tough stuff, because yeah, it's not for everybody, but thank goodness, there are people like you who do it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
enjoy my work. I wouldn't
yeah,
I wouldn't keep doing it if I didn't enjoy it. So I mean, some days are harder than others, but
for
um,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, gosh, I mean, I could pick your brain for another hour, but we're well over an hour, and I want to respect your time.
yeah.
But
Well, and
thank you
can
so
I say
much.
one thing, because there's one thing that I was thinking of real quick, that if there's anybody who's listening that is going through a divorce and they have custody and parenting time. I mean, I hear this from judges, and these there are statistics to support this, that going to trial and having other people make decisions for you, you know, the statistics show that you're going to be back in court. You're going to be back in court. So if you have kids and you can reach an agreement, and you're never going to get an agreement that both of you like. Mediators will often say, listen, and this is just in general, I guess, with any type of mediated agreement, is a good agreement is if both sides are unhappy, right? So,
Mhm.
if you think about that, when you're reaching agreement, you're talking about your kids. A lot of people think, oh, I need my day in court. I need to go tell my story. I need the judge to understand. Well, you know what? The judge has 100, other cases. The judge is going to listen to you. The judge is going to listen to the evidence that's submitted, but the judge is not going to know the specifics or the intimate details like mom and dad know. There's just no way that a judge, I mean, there's no way that I can, right? I mean, I know more than the judge, but I can't even present all of that to the judge so that the judge is going to understand everything. They do their best, but they're not going to know. So if you can figure it out and try and reach an agreement that you both can live with, the chances that your kids are going to, be better for it, that it's going to happen. It's going to happen. But
Yeah,
if you have a judge who makes this decision, one or both of you are going to be unhappy about something in that order. And that means you're more likely that you're going to be right back in the courtroom making, having the judge make different decisions because you're not happy with something that was decided.
yeah. So and you're saying this can be fleshed out through a mediation before it would go to court. So if they can,
Yeah, Minnesota, we're, in family law, we're required to do some form of ADR, so some form of alternative dispute resolution. And I could talk to you for a whole hour about different forms of mediation that family law people that we can go through. But yeah, you're required to go through at least one mediation session. So, just keep that in mind. People need to keep that in mind, that if you want to stay out of court, the statistics show that if you reach an agreement on your own, the better. Now, that doesn't mean there are some cases that just have to go to court. So, that those are the ones that
right,
go to trial. But
right,
not every case needs to go to trial.
yeah. Well, that's good advice. I mean, and I think most all parents, hopefully, in my optimist brain,
Mhm.
um, they want what's best for the kids. Even if they might not be operating as such. I think that ultimately they do. And so, um, if you know that a faster mediation is going to be best, then yeah, you gotta bend a bit and make a compromise.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Michelle.
Absolutely.
I so appreciate your time. And yeah, uh, if there are people who are needing your services, which, you know, I could say I hope they don't.
They might know somebody who does. How about
They
that?
might know
Yeah.
somebody, yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, we'll have that linked up. But
Sure.
yeah, it's such a fascinating field, and yeah, you're doing a lot of good work walking people through a difficult time. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you bet.